Story 1. I passed out at a party. The next morning, I found out that a girl at the party liked me. I had a girlfriend at the time who wasn't there. The girl at the party's friends suggested that she try to have sex with me while I was passed out and said, "It's okay, he's a man. He'll like it." Took a male friend of mine to throw them out. That made me feel pretty uncomfortable. Story 2. I used to teach martial arts, and there was this young boy in the class whose friends would come and meet him afterward. They would stand in the hallway of the sports center and come into the hall when class was over to speak to him. One of the group was a young girl who kept coming up to speak to me as I was tidying up, putting mats away, and so on. I was 27 at this point, by the way. One time she asked me out in front of people in the class, which comprised women in their 40s and men in their 30s. I said, "I think you're a bit young for me." She replied, "No, I'm not. I'm 16. Me, that's too young." All the while, people were standing and watching, and there was this awkward silence as if they were waiting to see what I would do next. She went away with her friends. Then another time she was there. She said something again at the end of the class, not directly to me, but it sounded like, "Yeah, I know, but I still want to." I had to ask the sports center management to request that people stay in the hall and remain there until the people they have come to collect are leaving. It made me feel uncomfortable. I certainly didn't want to give people a reason to talk. Story 3. Oh wow. Well, one girl at college was obsessed with me. I repeatedly told her I wasn't interested. That didn't stop her from telling me she wanted to marry me, and she knew we one day would. Then eventually she seemed to have moved on, and she got a boyfriend. She wasn't an awful girl, so I was happy for her and happy to move on from it as friends. So one day another student decides to throw a party, and we're both invited. I get pretty drunk, but I'm always still pretty with it regardless of how much I drink, so I remember the next sequence perfectly still. I find her sitting on some stairs crying, so I ask her what's up and comfort her. Turns out her boyfriend has left her. So I give her a hug as she cries onto my shoulder. But as I pull away, she quickly leans in and kisses me. I instantly stood up and left in spite of her tears. I pretty much went blackout after that, and when I woke up I was in bed with the host of the party. Anyway, the next day I get into college and she's told people I sexually assaulted her. That was very hard for me and utterly terrifying. However, the party was mostly comprised of girls who backed me and informed my tutors of her obsession. I'm so grateful to that host. I think she stayed with me all night to make sure the crazy girl couldn't try anything. This girl still sends pictures of us together on that night 3 years on. I don't think she understands how much she hurt me and how terrified I was. Story 4. During a briefing to some military officials, I had a strange woman I had to work with. I briefed right after her, and it was my first time meeting her. As she finished, she grabbed me through my uniform and said, "And Petty Officer me is here to show us a good time. My captain, executive officer, master chief petty officer, my chief, warrant officer, leading petty officer, mentor, other officers and chiefs, and my wife were the audience." It was a very unpleasant day after that, as my wife and I pressed charges and had to go through that process. My warrant officer was so kind and caring to me during all of it, and my chain of command has banned any jokes about it. This is in the Navy. I'm in the Navy. My wife is a naval officer in the Navy. A captain is an 06 in the Navy, the highest officer before reaching admiral. And yes, it was weird and uncomfortable. Story 5. The time my then best friend's wife sexually assaulted me. I then tried to talk about it and heard what some women in my life truly believe. Men cannot be sexually assaulted. Why didn't you just overpower her? You ruined her marriage. Great times. Story 6. Just last year, I badly damaged my hand and had to have surgery. My hand was bandaged, but it couldn't be put in a cast as I had metal wires put through my hand to keep the bone in place while it healed. Anyway, I was invited out to a bar by some friends, and after weeks of isolation following the surgery, I gladly accepted the chance to get out of the house and socialize, though it was risky, of course. I met up with my friends, a mix of guys and girls. They were all very interested in my injury, and I politely warned them to be careful around my hand. One of the girls came over, touching my hand and saying she'd look after me. I was like, No thanks, please don't touch it. Then she started touching and rubbing her hand over my crotch. I felt so uncomfortable and couldn't properly get her off me as I had a drink in my free hand. I wasn't interested in this girl and told her we were just friends, trying to walk away, but she kept following me, seemingly enjoying the fact that I couldn't physically stop her in my current state. I then told her to leave me alone, and finally, she got the hint and walked off in a sulk. Her friend then came over to me and asked, "What's wrong with you? Are you gay?" I just gave her a dirty look. The girl came back, said she was sorry, and tried touching me again. I had had enough and told her not to come near me again. I told the guys I was leaving to go to another bar, and some of them came with me and we had a great night. This experience really opened my eyes to how some women will try to take advantage of you when you're in a weakened state, which was surprising to me as I never imagined women to be like that and had never had the problem before. Story 7. When I woke up to a weird pressure between my legs after a night of illicit use around 3 in the morning, thankfully, I kicked those habits a few months later to find some random, unpleasant girl I had rejected numerous times prior undressing me, already straddling me. It got heated. I said some terrible things, but she should have left me alone when I've already said no. This is something I never thought would happen to me, but it did. Looking back at it after sobriety and a clearer mindset, I shouldn't have been associating with that group from the beginning. Edited for clarity. I appreciate all the feedback and responses. Wow, I've now vowed to put more money into support groups in my area for sexual abuse survivors. You guys are awesome. Story 8. Every time Mom's friends would come over to drink, someone would always end up grabbing my ass. If I went into the bar we had, the comments didn't end until I left or they became gross enough for my mom to get them to stop. Story 9. My ex had told me that she wanted to break up but still be best friends and hang out. I agreed, and we hung out the same day she broke up with me. The entire time, I was trying to respect her boundaries and not touch her or try to cuddle her on the couch, but she wasn't respecting mine. She eventually told me she didn't want to break up, and I agreed to that as well. It was a series of mistakes, but I digress. To preface, I have a huge issue with saying no or telling someone to stop due to anxiety. That night, we were cuddling in her bed, watching TV, and she started grabbing me, putting my hand in her crotch, etc. I immediately thought this was an awful idea. We had just broken up and gotten back together on the same day. I really didn't want to be doing something sexual that day. She eventually crawled on top of me and started having sex with me without asking, which made me freeze up. That was the first time we had sex and the first time I ever had sex. I wasn't comfortable with it given the context. She ended up breaking up with me again a few days later. I think she got back together with me to use me for sex, which made me really depressed for a while, but it was for the best in the long run. I wish I had the courage to tell her no or to stop because I really didn't want to lose my virginity that way. Those advances made me pretty uncomfortable. Story 10. This is a fun one for me. During college, there was a girl in my dorm who I was not into at all. She also stated that I wasn't her type, but for some reason, she loved coming into my dorm room unannounced, sitting next to me, and getting all up in my personal space. She was being overly friendly, and I wanted to avoid her without being mean, so I would literally hide in my closet or bathroom when she came into my room and wait there until she left. Edit. For everyone comparing my experience to sexual harassment or assault, let me assure you it was nothing like that, though I'm sure women-on-men harassment is more prevalent than most people think. In my case, at no point did I fear for my safety or well-being. She was just too social to the extent of being downright oblivious to my discomfort zone. Think Kelly Kapoor from The Office. In fact, that was our code name for her among the guys. Hey, Kelly was looking for you. Story 11. I had a coworker at a Chipotle I just started at in college. It was mostly college students working there, and she and I were both students as well. She was friendly to me, which can be nice in a new job where you're trying to integrate, so I reciprocated. Within the first 3 days of working there, she kept comparing me in looks and mannerisms to her boyfriend. For obvious reasons, this made me uncomfortable. While on shift with her, I mentioned I had to go to the computer lab after work for finals. She basically cornered me in the lab and got me to agree to hang out later. She wanted to drink, and I made it clear that I had finals and work the next day and wouldn't be drinking. She showed up at my house with two 32-ounce beers anyway. After doing the usual body language cues that women show, she started talking about her sexual fetishes, such as her death fetish and wanting to be with someone on an embalming table. She said this in a room full of 5 people who had never met her before, including 2 roommates and 2 friends that were over. When I said I was going to bed, she tried to follow me upstairs, and I had to make it clear I was going alone, and she needed to leave. It was super awkward having to see her on shift for the next 6 months. Story 12. She was a first cousin of my dad, technically my aunt, but only about 6 years older than me. I was 15 at that time. She always stood suggestively before me when we were alone, and I always ignored her advances. At one time, she even told me that she wondered if I was even a man. All of that made me very uncomfortable. It still does sometimes. Story 13. My boss at my internship has not been shy about hitting on me. It's extremely uncomfortable. I'd like to be offered a job after the internship because I like the work. I don't want it to be because she wants something from me, and I don't want to be offered it because she's been rejected by me. It makes the whole situation bad. It makes me angry that she would make this fun opportunity feel like this. I don't trust the sort of person who would do this to me to be the sort of person who handles rejection with grace. Story 14. When this one woman tried to make the fact that she was cheating on her boyfriend with various guys and wanted to cheat with me as well a seduction point, and when that didn't work, she thought informing me that I'd be her first guy from the other side of the tracks would somehow do the trick. She was from this southern old money family and believed that anyone living in New England, I'm from New Hampshire, is automatically white trash unless they're from a handful of very exclusive zip codes. This was in college years ago, and I was actively forming a relationship with someone else at the time, so I didn't pay it any mind after the fact. But when it happened, I just felt so bad for her. Living in a delusion where she's this manic pixie dream girl to be desperately desired by the likes of me. Yes, she really said, "Can you even imagine someone like me sleeping with the likes of you? Go on, imagine it." As if that's a turn on. And when I said no the first time and she thought that insulting me and my family would somehow get me in the mood, I was left massively confused and concerned for her. I pitied her, which was a new and unwelcome feeling when someone was trying to seduce me. The insults and insinuations, which were baseless, didn't even bother me so much as her approach to the whole thing. She ended up dropping out, I think. I just hope that boyfriend got away at some point down the road. Story 15. I was drinking at a friend's house, and there were probably 5 or 6 of us there just chilling and drinking. We all ended up getting pretty hammered, so I stayed and slept in a spare room. The host had a friend there that I didn't find attractive at all. Not my type, so I wasn't interested. I would keep catching her eyeing me. So, about 3 a.m., I was awakened by this woman trying to get into bed with me. I told her no, and she kept saying please. I was very adamant that I didn't want her in there. She kept saying please, and I won't do anything, I just want to lay down. I told her to sleep on the couch. She kept insisting on laying down with me. I still said no. She ended up laying down on the end of the bed, and I got up and slept on the couch. I'm glad I woke up when she came in, as I may have been raped or assaulted. I ended up leaving before she woke up, which I'm glad about because that would have been awkward. Story 16. I was not the one involved, but I felt uncomfortable for a friend. He was just relaxing at a club, and this girl kept dancing on him. The whole time he was trying to push her away gently, but she kept coming back and putting her hands on his face and such. He couldn't just push her away because he didn't want to get into trouble. Story 17. I worked at a restaurant, and this one lady at the bar got totally hammered. She and her friend were the last ones to leave, so I unlocked the door for them as they were leaving. She thanked me a lot and hugged me. Then she kissed me on the lips and grabbed me. She was beautiful, but the reason it made me uncomfortable is that she was a very drunk white woman. Had it been the other way around, I'm a 6'2" Hispanic male, things would have been very different. Everybody expected me to be okay with it. I was also in a relationship at the time. Story 18. I was telling my current girlfriend about my experience of being assaulted by my boss in their car in front of my house, and she straight up said, I would definitely do that to you if it were me in your car. I didn't want to turn the situation sour or make her uncomfortable, so I think I said the perfect response of, yeah, well, with you, I'd actually want that to happen. But every time I think about it, it makes me cringe. Story 19. When I was 19 and new to the Navy, there was a civilian woman in her 40s in the clinic who constantly made perverted comments, sexual innuendos, and flat-out requested sex. She was not my type, and I told her so, but no matter what I said or how I said it, she wouldn't take the hint. It made for a stressful work environment for sure.